I'm very excited to have you as one of my guests because, I've been wanting to do this for 10 years and I'm finally getting around to doing it. And it's nerve-wracking and scary, but I really appreciate all the support you've given me. And for context, could you introduce yourself, who you are, what you do,
Uh,
who you are in my life?
uh, well, just I play a small part in your life. I'm actually Esther's husband. So we've been together nearly 6 years. We've just got married a couple of months ago at the time of recording this podcast. And we went on honeymoon for a month to Tanzania, and then a second wedding celebration in Uganda. And we've just gotten back into life back at home as a married couple. Um, with context around the podcast, Esther had been uh, explaining to me that she's wanted to do something like this for so long. We kept coming up with excuses, and this isn't ready, and this isn't right, and we don't have this, we don't have that. But the way I saw it, she was just denying herself an opportunity to actually do what she wanted. So I encouraged, and here we are.
Here we are. But it's I think that's an interesting thing to touch on because we talk about that so much when you're in business. You think you need to have all these things in place. And you know that I've fallen into that trap so many times of I need the latest equipment. I need to buy a drone, which I've never used. I need to do this. And I think it's that everything gets in the way of actually doing the work, but the work is the thing that's going to push you forward. So you run your own business. How has that been over the last 4 years?
Right now, I've just went full time into my own marketing business, which is largely based around social media management, and also marketing coaching, where I essentially, rather than with the social media where you're social media management where you're posting everything for clients and taking that off their hands, the marketing coaching side, I'm providing the strategy and the content, and then the student essentially is taking it from there, but I'm given daily, weekly, monthly support and feedback on anything from messaging, content to their Instagram stories, um, and just general support along the way. So, as I say, I've been doing that full time now for the last couple of months again at the time of recording. So, it's going well. I've got a few clients on board recently, which is good, which has allowed me to pursue it properly. Um, Before that, I had been trying to do it. Jumped in head first, as you know, and essentially failed at it because I had no plan and no financial backing to actually do it. So I ended up going back into the coffee job. I had for I'd been working in coffee for about 10 years before that. So I ended up going back in there um to try and have another crack at it and build it up a different way rather than jumping in head first. So that's kind of been probably a year and a half process where you've supported me financially through most of it. Um, it's only now I'm at the point where I can financially support myself. And going full time at it has really given me a lot more time throughout the week to supercharge it essentially. Without you know working for £10 an hour in a coffee shop where it was taking a lot of energy without getting much return. I'm now able to focus my time and energy and actually building and scaling the coaching side of it, as well as having a baseline of social media management clients on a retainer, that kind of covers all bills and helps me save and helps us save and everything else. So there's probably a lot more to it, which we might get into, but that's a brief overview of where I'm at the minute, and it's amazing. I feel grateful to actually be doing it full time now and put a real focus in it because I'm learning so much.
Mm. So I want to jump back to kind of the start of your story of where you come from. What was that like growing up to because I think what's interesting about I think our connection is that we've always felt like we're outsiders. And then I kind of want to segue into how we met and our relationship and and then kind of jump into like the business side of things of like the failure, because you touched on like you said that you failed. And I think obviously I had a front row seat to it, but I think it's interesting to kind of like dive deeper into that on like a wider context. So where are you from and what was your upbringing like?
I'm from Crossmaglen, South Armagh, so small town. Um, like any small town in this part of the world, it's you've got, you know, that sort of small town mentality where pretty much everybody is the same at a certain age, wearing the same things, doing the same things, speaking about the same things, going to the same sort of places. Um, and I was obviously part of that for a while because at a certain age, you want to fit in, and if you've got no friends or anything, you're just going to be lonely. Um, there's a certain part of your life where I feel like it's useful to be lonely, but when you're growing up, maybe as a teenager, 14, 15, 16, it's important to have friends, and it's probably a better thing to go along with the crowd for a while, because you need to be socialized in some way to understand the social norms and what you do and what you don't do, and that bit of sort of banter between lads and all that sort of stuff. That's good. Especially I grew up playing football. Um, so with that, there's a certain amount of banter that happens between the team and between the lads and everything else. And you need to have a sort of thick skin to be able to deal with it. And again, it's a good thing because it's almost like a test for life in that if you can't be part of a team, if you can't be teased for a little bit, what are we going to do with you when things go wrong? So can we trust you to, stand up when our backs are against the wall? Can you last the sort of full match whenever things get hard, whenever we're down and defeated? Or are you kind of just going to give up when things are hard? So that kind of set the set the standard for how we kind of interact as young men in that sort of arena. Um, and then eventually for me it kind of just like went to be a bit too far, or like I wasn't just like maybe as passionate about the football side of things as well as the kind of bantery, jokey kind of stuff, where I was just like I wanted to explore a wee bit more. I was also into different things than a lot of the guys on the teams were and in my friend group were. Um, Simply just from maybe going to a different school than a lot of them, or being interested in different kinds of people and being introduced to different kinds of people. I've always been curious about, you know, the rockers and artists and geeks and everything else. But when you come from where I come from and you grow up playing football, you're automatically labeled as a jock. Again, it's okay to be put into groups at a certain stage of your life because you need to establish an identity for yourself before you can kind of explore that identity. Um, but because I was labeled as a jock, I couldn't be seen talking to artists, geeks, rockers, all those kind of guys that were actually curious about and probably relate more to now, on a personal level than I would any of the jocks. Um, but at the same time, I kind of, even though I was part of a group, I didn't really feel like I wanted to be there or belonged or could relate, or it wasn't just who I was fully. I knew there was sort of more that I wanted to explore. Um,
Okay, so you were in that group when you were younger and then you came to Belfast. Like what was that experience like of finding yourself and just kind of the things that you've gone through within your life, to kind of form your identity and because you're very much a deep person with a lot of emotions and you think a lot about life and I think you've been like that from a very young age, but I would imagine especially being like a young guy from Crossmaglen living in Belfast, it's like there wasn't many outlets for you or was there struggles?
yeah, so moved to Belfast part time, um, for uni, lived with a group of guys. from home. Um, and that was fine, but that's probably when I started to notice I was, wanting to do different things or wearing different things and trying out different things. Um, Whether that was something as simple as like wanting to stay up on the weekends versus going home to, to cross to kind of see your family and stuff. I was like, I'm here. I would actually love to see different things and go to different places. But again, the kind of high school mentality bleeds into university and then eventually bleeds into how you live your life essentially when you stay within that group. Um, so that was probably around the time where I was like getting sick of the banter and the jokes and everything else and kind of feeling like I was the butt of the joke essentially because I was that slightly slightly different. But like when I look back, it might be something as simple as wearing a different jacket, or a different pair a different pair of shoes. Which seems ridiculous to anybody who's not from a small town, but that is actually the way it is. Um, and then yeah, eventually you just kind of get called crazy or weird, and you kind of start to believe it. And then you start to doubt yourself and second guess yourself. Is like, is this weird? Should I just stay the way I am, or should I actually lean in more to these curiosities or whatever? So that kind of like led me down just like rebelling against it completely. Um, and not really doing it for what I wanted, but to just be different than everybody else. So I swayed the other way of like going completely against what everybody else wanted me to do. And wearing just like outrageous things like flowery trousers and, jackets and everything else. And like part of that was fine. Like that's to me, that's a journey of, finding your own style and finding what works for you. You sometimes have to go to those limits to kind of pull back a wee bit and understand why you were doing it and, everything else. So I was kind of just embodying this crazy person that people had labeled me as, and this outlandish person, um, who went places by themselves and partied with different people and blah blah blah. Um, and then eventually down the line, I kind of came to the conclusion that it wasn't actually me. I was just doing it for the rebellion aspect, which is in me as well, as you know.
Big one.
Um, So I kind of have that in me as well, which is interesting. So that was kind of what came out of that. Um, and eventually after uni, I stayed up here. And you know went full time into coffee. Um, and kind of broke away from that group that I had been living with in uni. To live with another friend who's kind of more like me and more like wanted to do more similar things that I did, but still was in the football uh team and that sort of weekly routine and stuff as well. But it was good because I had a place to stay, but I also had my own freedom without being judged essentially. Um, so that's where I was with that.
I guess where my mind goes next is like, because I feel like I met you kind of at the tail end of when you were still kind of exploring, your style and you're still very out there. And I remember on our first date, which I'll always correct you on, was like, I remember you saying that you weren't a creative person. You were like, I'm not creative. And I was like, are you fucking joking me? Like, you're the most like creative person I can see, especially for a guy, because at the time you had long blonde hair. You'd always wear in a ponytail. And then I just thought you were really interested, with aesthetically of how you looked and how you dressed and how you put things together. And from the outside, you wouldn't know that you were struggling within yourself and your identity. It was like you definitely carried a lot of confidence with that.
Yeah. I think at that time that was probably at a time where I was kind of just reckoning with all the, you know, uh I had been so kind of beat down by people's comments and opinions that I had kind of internalized, and maybe people didn't say anything, but it's what I thought they were saying, and I had been so beat down by that that I actually started to believe it. And so that was probably the reason why when we met, that was my belief The belief was that I wasn't creative because I wasn't doing anything creative. I wasn't, I wasn't listening to those uh call-ins to actually do something. I was kind of stifling myself for, you know, other people essentially. And I had, chipped away at all the unique and interesting edges that I had before that. And that's what happens, when you spend so much time with people who not like, aren't really interested in those parts of you, you just kind of you, be- yeah, you get worn down, and you kind of, as I say, you stifle those parts of yourself because they're not actually being rewarded, or they're not being encouraged. They're actually being, you know, taken away essentially, or you're giving other people the power to take them away from you. And that's kind of what I did for so long. So it was almost like when I met you, I was starting from zero essentially, and I was just unsure if I had anything to offer you, in terms of actually being a partner. And that's where I was, confidence wise, and within myself as well. It was like, what have I what have I got?
Yeah. I don't
You
know why
know?
I feel emotional.
Yeah, that's
That took me by surprise.
um but yeah, as you know, from day one, I wanted something with you, but I knew I kind of had to be more. I had to become more. I had to reignite the fire that I had in me in those previous years that had been kind of like dampened by experiences and, you know, the power I give different people and everything else, because I don't want to put that on other people. I know it's always been my responsibility to kind of, listen to myself and trust myself to actually do these things. But, somewhere along the way, we give we give that power away to other people, and you can kind of only learn that through experience. Um, so yeah, I was probably part of me was probably, you know, beat down so much that I actually genuinely believe that. Um, but also part of me was like reignited when I met you to actually bring that version of myself back. But I knew I needed to do it quick because you were going to friend zone me.
It was unfortunate at the time, when you met me, because I was also in the most extreme version of myself. Like, I had just come out of a really horrendous relationship, and then I was single that year, and I'd never really been single before. So I grew up in like a very Christian upbringing, and I was always really reserved and nice and like well mannered, and would always people please and all that kind of stuff. And then I remember that year just being like, fuck all of that. Like, I just want to go wild. And I did for my own standards, and I did. And then I remember just being so extreme with you, and so I was a hot mess, to say the least. But then I remember when we first met, I was just like, let me just throw out everything that I've done before and do the complete opposite. Let me be real and say how I actually feel, instead of like, what you do when you're first dating someone and you're like presenting your best self. I didn't do that with you. I give you where I was at the time.
Mm,
I was really hurt and I was going through a lot, and I was just like, the thought of like a relationship was like, no way. Like, I can't go through this again to get to know someone again, but also just like, I always associated relationships as like, it would take another part of me. And I was just figuring out how to like come back to myself and be my full version of myself. So I think when I met you, it was like, I also wasn't used to nice men, and you were really nice and lovely, but I associated that with just like, ugh, like, ew, no, I don't like, it was just so foreign to me. So it wasn't an easy, like, I think I put you through like a lot of tests very early on. But the thing that we've talked about all the time is that I was super honest with you. I was everything that anyone else knew, you knew. You probably knew more. And I remember at that time, I just got so much pressure from everyone being like, will you just like call him your boyfriend? Will you just like be exclusive? And we just do this? And I was like, no, like, that's not what I want. I'm not there yet. Liam is very aware of my circumstances and where I'm at. I'm not, told you weekly. If you don't like this, there's the door. So, what was your experience with that?
Um, those first couple of, well, yeah, maybe 2 years, no, a year and a half, maybe. Um, it was it was tough in the sense that I knew I had to be patient, but ultimately I knew what I wanted, and I was willing to kind of put my own needs aside for the first while to kind of let you go through that. And the best thing I could do was to actually give you space and time, versus
But how did you know to do that? You were only 23 years old. That's so young.
yeah. Well, during the previous years, like after kind of leaving that friend group, I that's when I had kind of started the like self-development journey and reading books and podcasts and different things and around emotional intelligence and psychology and human behavior and all those kind of things. So I had kind of done not all the work obviously, but enough work to know and be aware of like when someone is saying something, what they actually mean.
Mm. So I'm like, there's the door, you can leave. But secretly, I'm like, just be patient with me.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
hold tight.
So reading into that was was kind of where I could be patient. Um, because I was also doing all the work on myself and I was like in that period of self-development and wanting to work on myself. And as I say, I knew I wasn't good enough to to be a worthwhile partner just yet. At least not in the capacity of where we're at now. Maybe, hanging out, having good conversations, all that sort of stuff, but not someone who can, you know, you'd want to marry, essentially. Like, and that's okay. That's like, I'm happy enough to say that. I'm not putting myself down or anything, but it's okay to be at a part of your life where you don't feel like you're where you want to be, and there's always ways that you can improve yourself and work on yourself and everything else, you know. Um,
So, what were the steps? Like, when did you know that I was about to friend zone you, and what did you do to change?
I think it was actually after the first day. I knew I had to move quick.
I thought it was at least a couple of months. Oh,
No, um,
I mean, you're right.
yeah, I knew.
Because I
Um,
remember being like, he's really nice, but I just didn't know if you were for me.
yeah, see, that's the thing. You, people say they want a nice guy, but I don't know if you actually do. I think you want someone who's,
Because you associate nice with being a pushover,
yeah,
and that's so unattractive.
and that's probably what I was. It's pretty simple, like that's probably where I was in that moment because I had been pushed over
Mm.
for so long and let people push me over for so long.
Oh, it makes me want to give you a hug.
But
Oh.
it's it it's where I was at and it is the way it is. Um, so that was the point for me where I knew I had to start being courageous and working on myself. Um, to actually be someone worth keeping, and worth being with someone. Um, so yeah, I had to start talking more.
Oh my
Uh,
God, he would drive me
that's one thing.
mad. Oh my word, this
Uh,
man was silent. I talk a lot, but he wouldn't ask me any questions. No questions. Wouldn't contribute to conversations, and I would literally just be like, "So what do you think about this? And what do you think about this? And what about this?" And
yeah, again, that was all a product of what I had experienced before, where if I was to give my opinion, it would have been shut down or laughed at, and you know, that was the only evidence I had from giving opinions to people, um, to peers and people who I had spoken to, um, up to that point. Um, so that's kind of where that comes from. But over the couple of months after that, I was kind of actively going like, okay, how do I ask more questions? Take that feedback, ask more questions, give her time, um, be interesting, be interested in what you have to say, and then ask a question afterwards. That was kind of the formula for conversations and improvement, and you actually want to see me again. Um, so yeah, things kind of developed from there, but you were still kind of stubborn in the fact that you didn't want anything. But I was also stubborn in the fact that I did. So it seems that my stubbornness had uh won out in a lot of ways. Um, but yeah, I think it was more patience, and the the understanding that I had was that you just needed time, and that was the best thing I could give you,
Mhm.
not anything else.
Absolutely. Because you didn't force any of your agenda on me at all. You didn't tell me, okay, you didn't give me any ultimatums. You just showed up for me because that was that year as well. I was doing a lot of like different creative things with different groups, and I was also like doing my own textile stuff, whatever. And I remember you would come to every single event, even if you were working the day after or the day before or during the day, you'd always somehow make it. And I remember just being like, wow, this person is like showing up for me, like consistent. Like even though you didn't say much, your actions spoke louder. And I think that also, so that mixture with time and space. And I didn't make it easy for you because I was also like, I don't want to be exclusive. I don't want to call you my boyfriend. I still stand by that, even though we're married now. And I think I was just working out a lot of like, what does it actually mean to be in a healthy relationship? Because I think so often, traditionally, it's like when you use the term boyfriend, girlfriend, you kind of put into this category of like, okay, here's the expectations of what comes with that. And I didn't want that. I wanted to see you as a person. I wanted to feel free and to feel like we're both individuals working together in a relationship where I'd never had that before. I would just like completely submit to the relationship and give away everything of me. And then I would break up with that person, I would have nothing left for myself. So I was like, there has to be another way, and let me just experiment with this. And I mean, truthfully, and you know this, like I didn't see it going anywhere. And I never thought about the future. I didn't romanticize the future. I was just like, let's just take it day by day. And we did that for like 4 years before we got engaged, which was amazing, you know, because it's been like a really slow and organic step by step. We weren't rushing for any milestones. Everything has kind of happened the way that
Yeah,
it's unfolded.
yeah. Like I was never really keen on boyfriend girlfriend labels either.
You were at the start, and then when I explained to you, I was like, then you were like on board. You're like, yeah, that's kind of cool.
Yeah,
But no one else will
but
get it.
yeah, I wasn't keen in the sense that when you when you do label yourself like that, there's almost like a box that you check at each point. You uh put your profile picture together on Facebook, you put up a selfie, and you change
We're
your
not even
relationship.
friends on Facebook
Yeah,
still.
still won't accept me. uh, but yeah, you like change your relationship status, all that sort of stuff, and then you kind of subconsciously start thinking things like, as my boyfriend, you should be doing this. As my girlfriend, you should be doing this. We should be going these places together. We should be, you know, at these kind of things or at this kind of stage. But yeah, as you say, like most relationships, well, that's obviously a generalization, but a lot of relationships can, start off really high and like everybody's in love and blah blah blah, and then kind of fizzles out a little bit after a couple of years, and then you know that's that's not really optimal if you're kind of like trying to set up a life together, which is what I essentially wanted from the start. How I knew that, I don't really know, but I knew that I wanted, that was the intention. So it's kind of just taking the same approach as you would with like a business in a way, where you're like, you're not gonna get like loads of stuff loads of good stuff happening up front. It's gonna like take a while to understand like what do you want, what do I want, how do we kind of navigate this together and like build and build and build and like rather than us starting from way up high and then fizzling out, to me it feels like it's started like low, low, low and then like
Mm-hmm.
just shot up
Mm-hmm.
um like substantially since probably since we moved in together and then after that got engaged
Mm-hmm.
because we had
Because we moved in like a few days before the pandemic.
yeah, but we had essentially laid the foundations um up front and we had communicated things and set up systems and boundaries and routines along that path and then when we had those established we were like this is just like now we start scaling the joy and the time together and how we communicate and the closeness we have and everything else um rather than it starting off really fast and then like 3 years down the line wondering what's happened and then starting to build up the foundations again. So it was kind of like having the hard stuff up front, having the hard conversations up
Oh,
front, and then
from the beginning,
yeah.
from like, and I think that's something I think is amazing that we did from the start because from the second date, essentially we were diving deep into like negotiating what this relationship is or what it could look like or what it doesn't look like. And that's something that we've held till now as like a core element of our relationship.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to go about it. I would recommend it for more people because
It is
if you
hard.
get it's a hard period, and obviously you don't want to do it with someone that you don't think you're going to be with, or obviously there's a certain point where you have to question if it's worth doing. But my feeling was that it was worth something. It was worth actually, being patient and sticking with it and giving you the time that you needed. Because on the other side, I saw like a future.
I'm glad one of us did.
Do you see it now?
Well, yes, I'm not your wife. I think for me, the turning point, so whenever 2020, just before the pandemic hit, actually, we went to Uganda and you'd came with us. Um, and that was like a really big step for me to like bring you into like my culture. So I'm half Irish, half Ugandan, grown up abroad, and then grew up in Egypt and then came back when I was 17. So like I've always felt kind of out of place of like being in Northern Ireland, and I never in my wildest dreams would have thought I would end up with a white man from Armagh, like the country. Like this is just completely, and I think that's what I also grappled with for a long time of just like culturally we don't make sense because I've never experienced that before. I've always dated people with a similar cultural background. And I was saying this on the last podcast I was on with Macy of like I always thought I needed to date someone from a similar background for them to see me and understand my experience. And I think with you it just completely shocked me that like we come from complete different backgrounds. Like we didn't grow up the same, completely different life experiences, but yet being with you is the most seen I've ever felt and heard and comfortable. And I've been able to like really heal and understand my identity. So bringing you to Uganda was like almost like a test of like, okay, we've, been dating for what, like 2 years at that point. It's like, let's see what he's like in Africa. Let's see, like, let's take him out of his comfortable environment and put him here with my family for 3 weeks who are absolutely mad. And also my extended family, in Uganda. And you shocked me. You shocked me. I actually thought you were going to have like a meltdown and like, no, actually, I thought you were going to be okay because you're actually quite a calm and grounded person. But I was surprised at how well you managed that trip. And then I knew in my heart the next time that we come back, it's going to be when we're married. But I just didn't tell you at that time because I was like, I'm not letting this man know what my feelings for him. So what is Because like where you come from, like you don't date people like me and people like my background. What has the experience like dating and being immersed into my life and my culture and my friends and because that's all very new to you.
Mm. Um, I suppose the Ugandan trip was like a. It's not necessarily your life, although it's like part of your cultural background. It's like you don't really associate with Ugandan culture and how they live and their values and different things. So it was kind of we have different cultures to a point and different backgrounds to a point, but we've also both grown up in Northern Ireland with like working class family and everything else. So there is like an overlap there as well. So for me, like it wasn't too difficult. It just so happens that you've got a different skin color than I do, and like that's part of your identity, and like, it's obviously endearing as well because it's a lot more interesting, and you know, like me being a curious person, I'm naturally attracted to things that are different and people that are different, and different stories and all of that. So it was like I didn't really see anything negative about it. Um, I think from maybe your end at the start, like friends and stuff might have been a bit like skeptical of me of you dating a white man and all this sort of stuff, like all the kind of stereotypes and psychological um conclusions people make when they see a certain person and all of that, um, which is like it's 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 like a funny one to navigate because you've never really done anything wrong or anything to upset certain people, but they all like there's an automatic like barrier to entry or like test that you have to pass in order to gain acceptance sometimes.
But I think also when I came to my friends, a lot of it was just because of my previous history. Like I think part of it was to do because you were white, and I've never done that before, so that was like, oh my God, what's Esther doing? She lost her mind. And another part was like in my previous relationships, I just kept so quiet about the hell I was going through. So like because also how we were navigating our relationship, it was very open and free, and there wasn't a lot of like structure. I wasn't confined in like boyfriend girlfriends. It was like, what is this? And they were just like really protective over me. And I think that took a long time for people to see that like you're actually a really nice person. And also all my friends don't live here. So it's like they didn't get that immediate contact to like get to know you. And at that time, you were also figuring out yourself. You're very quiet at that time and you were afraid to also
Mm. Yeah, like don't get me wrong, I think it was probably better for your friends to be skeptical than naive,
yeah,
you
absolutely.
know. Um,
Because I've been naive before and then
yeah, and like they've known you longer than I have, and they have a right to kind of like question and, see if you're actually a good fit for their friend, essentially. Um, and again, like that was part of my development as well to actually, accept that that's part of the game when you get into a relationship with someone's like their friends, family, extended family, all that sort of stuff. You need to make an effort with them as well. Um,
but in a cultural sense, like has it like what has that experience like I know you're saying we're coming from similar backgrounds, but my parents are very unique and my upbringing is very unique. So there's a lot of things that like we've really had to like explain to each other of like where we come from and what our life has been like. Or is it not? You don't think too much about it? I guess I think a lot about
like
it.
honestly, I haven't thought about it in that way. I've just thought about it like that you have an interesting background and I'm interested to know more. and get to know you more. Um, Again, might have been a consequence of the work I had done on myself to accept myself more and therefore see other people, regardless of like skin color and background, as just like people. Um, so I was kind of more just interested in like the mix of your mom from here, your dad from Uganda, um, getting to know more about that, and then visiting Uganda as well. That seems to be more of the mindset than, here where you have stereotypes and racism and different things. I actually align more with the Ugandan mindset where you're like, if this is family, you're our family now too, you know, um, regardless of what you look like. And like even before I went, that was kind of what I was thinking. And I was like, these people think like I think. And then as, you know, I said to you before, like when I went there, like I actually felt at home because there isn't these labels and stereotypes and all this baggage that we have that keeps us back from actually connecting with each other that we think we have to go through in order to, you know, be friends or, like a certain person or hang out with a certain person. It's like, who actually are you? Like, regardless of all that stuff, like, are you fun to be around or are you actually an asshole? Because you can be an asshole no matter what your skin color is, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Um, so for me, that like thankfully that actually hasn't been something that I've spent too much time thinking about. You know, um,
That's interesting. I think for me it was different because maybe also because you're coming into my family dynamic and like my mom is white and it's like you're not the odd one out. Where I think me coming into your family at the start, it just took me so long to be comfortable because I was like, oh my God, like I feel so different. And also it was where I was within myself. Like I was just very like turbulent with my identity. And then I went through a phase of almost like seeking out things that would upset me and like really making myself like feeling like I'm not relatable. We're actually pretty, I'm not about to say pretty basic, but I'm like, people can relate to me. I'm not like that different. But for so long, I was just like, oh my God, I'm so different and no one understands my experience and blah, 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 and this and this. And I think I didn't let people get close to me for such a long time because of my background. Like I actually made that a barrier. And then I think also with like the BLM movement and working through all that and really understanding who I am now as a person. Like I've done a lot of work on that. But at the start, I remember just being like, oh my God, I'm in a white family and no one understands me. And I just felt so out of place for so long. But then your family is like so lovely and they never treated me any differently, and that's, I think, testament to your parents of how they've raised you. It's like, so it's interesting. I think your parents would probably love going to Uganda as well because it's like you kind of accept who you are
mm,
and there's not that kind of assumption of who you are as a person.
yeah, like part of those things that you believe about yourself, like the barriers to, connecting with someone who's doesn't look like you, it's like a lot of that can be due to like the information you're consuming through the narrative that has been played out, in this like the last few years. Um, you know, Obviously you don't have to get into it too much about like victim mentality and all that sort of stuff. And like that you can embody that as your identity if you want, or you can actually say like, no, I like that's actually not my experience, despite being a different skin color in this place that you're telling me I'm supposed to be a victim or I'm so different from everybody else and blah blah blah. Like you can start to believe that, and that can be the thing that is actually like that's the story you tell yourself whenever you meet my family or meet anybody
Yeah.
else. And you know,
But I think it goes back to, I think for so long I rejected my white side. I even hate saying that, my white side, but like that part of me, my Irish side, I just was like, I was almost reject like the circle that I was in and things I was consuming was all about like, like we're so oppressed and we're so like this and that. And it really boxed me in. And I really thought that. Like I moved through this world thinking everyone is going to be racist to me or, and it wasn't actually my experience. But I was adopting these stories and these experiences from other people. And it's not to say I haven't experienced racism or discrimination or whatever, but I was also like really feeding into that narrative to the point where anyone's opinion was mine and I didn't know who I was. And actually, the pandemic was the best thing that's ever happened to me because I then separated myself from so many groups, cut a lot of people out as well, and like really had to think about like, who the fuck am I? Like, what does this mean to me? And what are my own thoughts? And by going away into my own world for so long and then finally reemerging, like, I think probably around the time of the wedding. But yeah.
Yeah. Like thing with that is you didn't accept not that you didn't accept your white side, but due to the narrative that has kind of been played out, um, through social media or mainstream media, there's actually no benefit to you accepting your white side as a mixed race person because there's nothing really to kind of, you know, there's nothing really to go off because you're if you're living in a country that's majority white and you're mixed race, you're never going to be seen as a white person. So
Oh.
it's like it doesn't actually make sense for you to kind of
Mm.
like not explore, but like to kind of
Integrate that, like,
yeah. There's
yeah.
no reason to integrate it. Whereas like you can identify with black culture more, or
Which I actually can, which
yeah,
is the funniest thing ever, which made me feel even more shit about my
yeah.
identity.
I probably know more about the black culture than you do.
Completely. Like you keep me like informed and current. Like I would. Okay,
Yeah.
it's all a different
But yeah,
conversation.
you know what I'm trying to
Yeah,
say. Like
yeah.
based on what you look like in this scenario, you're never going to be seen as a white person, but you might actually be seen as a black person. You might be referred to as a black person, even if you're mixed race. So it's like there's no identity to hold on to from the white side of being a mixed race person. Um, well, there wasn't for you anyway. I don't know anybody else's story, but that seems to be what I got from your experience. Um, but then with that, obviously, you hold on to those kind of narratives that um is being played out essentially. Um, yeah, it's a tricky topic to even speak about because when even
Like
if
even
you
though
played
I
this
can,
back and like
yeah,
someone was seeing me talking about a mixed race experience, it's like,
yeah. Who are
what do you
you
know,
is
white man?
exactly, exactly. And I used to think like that. I
Yeah.
genuinely used to think like that, and I think that's why, like, at the time of when we first started dating, I was just like, I, I just had that thing because at the time it was like very anti-white man, like fuck the patriarchy and fuck the white man and blah blah blah, and white people are oppressing us, and I just want to say that's not happening around the world, but it definitely influenced how I saw white people and even just that separation of like white and black and the labels. And I'm like, my mom's white. I'm half white, and I just, discarded that for so long. And I think, yeah, it was like during the pandemic, I finally had the courage to kind of create these conversations of just like hearing from both sides. I think the first one was Bridging the Gap. And it was just after the George Floyd shooting. Do you remember you were part of that? And it was just like, whoo, okay, there's something here, especially within a Northern Irish context. It's very different from the rest of the world. And it was all about labels and representation. And I think that's like themes that I will carry throughout the rest of my life. But it is a very kind of nuanced topic because
Yeah.
people are so quick to be angry or judgmental and label and just like it's like I don't know, it can feel scary to kind of say how you feel and then you're labeled as like controversial or
Yeah.
you're
I think
not.
yeah, with the work that you did at that time, it was it was so cool to see because everybody was kind of reactive. Whereas I think it was only like a year after everything you actually made something. Um, and I was actually thinking about this the other day of like what is the main thing, uh, one word to kind of represent the work you do, and I would say context. You contextualize things, you add a level of complexity and nuance to the conversation that most people don't. You're not reactive. You're actually you take your time to try and understand what you actually feel versus what you think you should feel. And that's why I'm happy you're doing this as well. But that's a side note. Um, yeah, you added context to the conversation of people's genuine experiences. Um, and you kind of found out that, people had experienced racism here. Also, people hadn't experienced racism here. And, some people, it wasn't even on their minds, you know, whereas the whole narrative was, you know, you're a victim or you're oppressed. And, the more, again, back to what we were talking about earlier, the more you tell people that, the more they're going to actually believe it. Um, because like your dad, for example, coming from Uganda and coming over here and experience what he's experienced, he's never let that hold him back or seen himself as any less than anybody else here. Um, so, if your dad can go through what he went through and still smile and still get up, get on with things, and that's not to dismiss anything or anybody's feelings or experience or anything like that, but there's there's always more to it. There's more context, always more context to be added. Um, and like you say, everybody has a unique story to tell.
I think one of the main projects that I've done so far that really shifted this was I'm an Individual when I interviewed Winnie and Tommy. That was like, and I think it was reflective of where I'm at right now. Of like, I'm definitely more self-accepting and I'm not going out of my way to seek these problems out as such. I'm just like actually just living my life and integrating all parts of me. And I think by interviewing them too, it was like the most positive like stories that I've ever heard. It actually went against the grain of like what you seen people assume people of color feel here. When he was like, I never experienced any racism. I didn't know people didn't like black people, like until she left. And Tommy was kind of the same of like he experienced it, but he didn't take it personally and he kind of was very much in his community. And it was just so positive and it was just like that is and I just picked them from random. I just followed them on Instagram, liked the aesthetic of their content, had no backstory to who they were. I was like, Lord, you've created this project. And it was so positive. And I think it's like, that's what I want to lean more into. If like, there's a lot of people that don't see themselves as victims or like oppressed and again, it's not to say that doesn't happen, but it was interesting to meet two people who are individuals, who are both people of color, and then kind of have an overlap in context to their experience here. And I was like, that's different from actually what's portrayed on the news, where anytime you mention a person of color, it's in relation to racism, which is frustrating because you don't want to be seen always as like, I think my thing was always like, I just don't want people to pity me. I don't want people to feel sorry for me. I don't want to be felt different because of my skin color. But yet people always kind of have done that based on what the media portrays. And I think with my work, like I love that you said that I give context because I think I do with whatever's currently happening, even though I'm so removed from society. But I think I forgot my train of
Yeah.
thought there, but
But
yeah.
that's a good thing because you're not being influenced by
Yeah.
it. You're actually, exploring what you want to find out, not
Mm.
just exploring it for, either
The
like
trend.
clickbait or
Yeah.
anything else. And that's what comes through. You learn more about yourself. You learn more about the people that you're actually talking to versus like targeting someone who's actually just gonna, you know, be negative about the thing or
Mm.
come in with you know, every every opinion nailed from what they've read or something.
Mm. So I want to shift gears to you starting your own creative journey of like, what time are we at? So it's nearly an hour already, which is mad. Um, yeah, I just want to know your experience of like you starting and also I want to touch more on like the failure that you experienced and go deeper in that.
Yeah. Um, so where should we go from? Leaving
So
Cafe O?
leaving Cafe O. So you're working in coffee for 10 years and then you
Yeah.
had enough.
I kind of wanted to branch out. I was doing so many different things within the coffee shop. I was running my own shop essentially, um, training baristas, fixing machines, doing the social media, and yeah, kind of upkeep with checking in with people throughout the shops and stuff. So I had like 4 or 5 different things that I could actually um develop skill wise and everything else. Um, but I had built up a good relationship with my boss, and I wanted to actually pursue the marketing thing a wee bit more. So I came to them with a proposal of this is what I could do, but pay it through my own business essentially, which I didn't actually have, but I wanted to kind of get it off the ground and start doing something through that. And long story short, I didn't really want to do it that way or wanted to keep in the same payment system as hourly work, but that wasn't where I wanted to go with it. Um, so I ended up leaving because I just kind of had enough. I was like bored, but also overwhelmed and stressed and like not getting any money from it. Um, so I left to pursue the marketing thing, um, and got a couple of clients on board, um, but ultimately didn't really have any plan or vision or like purpose at that point for actually doing it. It was just like I'm frustrated and I'm tr I need to leave. Um, and a couple of months later, I was kind of realizing, money's running out. I don't really know what to do, so I was going to get a part-time job in coffee just to keep the income. But you encouraged me not to because
I was also young
you're
and
like
naive.
you can't
You can't
give up
go
on this
back.
just yet. I was like, I'm not giving up. I just have no money, and I want to be able to do it for a wee while. So you went against that and said you'd provide me with the money instead. So I was like, great. But the main issue was that I didn't have any vision for it beyond like 6 months. Um, so yeah, 6 months later, naturally I was broke
So
and
sorry.
couldn't buy any Christmas presents. So this was from June I left, December. Yeah,
We have no money.
there's no money. You're getting a piece of paper for Christmas. You can draw your own pen. Um,
And then I stupidly booked us to go to Fermanagh for a week, and I was like, we could have saved that money
yeah,
to buy
but
it.
no matter, there was no vision, so it wasn't going to go anywhere anyway.
Mm.
It was kind of doomed from the start.
And that was a really dark time.
Yeah,
That was
because
dark.
there was nothing coming in and no prospects and no vision and no progress and not really know where to go. Like you can't survive. You can't survive like that without having a proper vision and a plan for actually what you're going to do and some level of predictability and some level of actually, a buffer for, if things go wrong, you actually have a buffer for a few months to, you you know, uh, actually fall back on. So if anybody out there is starting a business, don't just leave your job. That is the wrong way to go about it. Absolutely wrong way to go about it. Save up for a couple of months, 6 months at least, give yourself a runway of whatever whatever your expenses are each month, save about
6
six
months.
months, not 6 hours. So Christmas came, we got through it.
Just about.
Just about January, had a couple of days up in the mountains to think and relax and cry. After that, during that time, I messaged a friend who was running a coffee shop, and I was like, "Have you got any work? I need something." I was coming back with nothing. Um, So thankfully had a bit of work. So I went back full time, but made it clear that I didn't want to take on any responsibilities that I had beforehand. I just wanted to make coffee and go home. So it was simple. It wasn't taking any energy out of me. Uh, creatively, I knew how to make coffee. I'd been doing it for 10 years. But the only thing was that it was taking time, but that was fine because I had nothing else anyway. So 4 days in the coffee shop, um, while having one social media management client on the side. So I was like, okay, 4 days there, and then in the evenings, and then that one other day, which was a Monday, I would work on the with the social media management client. Um, so I had that on a monthly retainer as well as the coffee work. So the plan was that each client I got or expanded the work with that, um, I would drop a day in the coffee shop rather than just going like, brilliant, I've got another client, let's go. So that was like a more staggered approach. So that's for anybody listening, that's a better approach. Get yourself to a point where all your bills are covered. Don't quit your job. Wait until you're actually making enough money consistently to cover and save and, do all the things that you want to do first. And then over time, gradually drop it. Have a conversation with the people you're working with, you know, do a wee bit of extra work in the evening or weekends or whatever, but keep a level of income um from the job if that's what you're in. And then use that sort of staggered approach. So my kind of thing was anytime I got a new client, I drop a day. Because the money from the client would cover the money that I'd be losing from the other day. But also give me back some time to kind of work on the social media stuff more. So eventually got to the point where I was down to 2 days within about a year. Um, and then at the start of this year, no, just before we got married, I was like kind of thinking about, just taking the leap and going all in. So decided before we got married that before we got married and went on honeymoon that I would, go all in on the business, even though I still didn't have my finances covered. I thought I had learned my lesson.
Well, you thought you had your finances covered before you went, and then you came back, and then
Yeah, I lost the client that I was working with, because it just didn't make sense anymore, on both our ends, which was fine, but it also put me back to where where I was the first time I tried it. But
this was 6 weeks ago.
but I had also learned a lot more in the year and a half that uh, I had a year and a half of experience essentially
Yeah.
and skills developed and hours put in and all that sort of stuff. So I wasn't actually worried, because I just joined a mentorship program a couple of months before that, which was helping me and, streamline the business and set up the systems and the process. So I actually had a business this time versus, just like getting paid on the fly with no contracts and all that sort of stuff. So I had all those things in place. So I was like, I just need to focus and take my time with this. So thankfully got my first coaching client, with my marketing coaching program, and then also another social media management client, which then covered my bills, um, which was great. And I still have that in place today. And then just over the last couple of weeks, started to get more people coming in, and we're now at a point where bills are covered and I can actually see money at the end of the month, which is great and a relief more than anything for you. So it's an
I'm a very
interesting,
supportive wife.
you are, I know, but it's an interesting place to be because, since we got married, we're naturally kind of switching roles in a way where you were kind of the breadwinner, if you want to put it that way. But also you were more so in an action, outwards focused action kind of energy, trying to build your thing and getting clients and all that sort of stuff. Whereas I was, you know, more inward, trying to figure out how I'm going to make this work because I knew after we got married, we wanted to start a family and all that sort of stuff. So that would mean you might not be able to work as much. So that puts the responsibility on me to kind of get myself to a point where I can cover the both of us maybe. So it's kind of switching around now to like you're in your inwards journey and doing this podcast and speaking to people more, and I'm really focused on actually building this because I know there's a framework to do it and I can see that it's working. Um so that's kind of where I'm at now with it. Which is a great place to be. Obviously it's hard work and everything else, but I couldn't see myself going back to do anything else. I'm learning so much. It's giving me energy. Um the model I'm using is just like really scalable as well, which means I can develop resources and different things, especially with the coaching stuff. I can develop resources and systems that actually, I can take on more people without having to do more and more work, essentially trading like time, more money. Whereas like do the work up front and then you can actually scale it. So that's where I'm at the minute, which is good.
Very exciting. But it's cool to see your journey. Like obviously I've known you for a long time and from the start you're like, I'm not creative. You always said that like you're not meant to have your own business. To then for you to challenge those beliefs and be a completely different like you're a completely different person from the person I met 6 years ago.
Yeah. Like again, with anything like this, it's really at the core of it, it's a personal development journey as well. You know, like I went from telling myself that I wasn't creative to now it actually being what I do for a living and how I support us, down the line. Like that's what I'm doing. But also in between that, the beliefs I had about I was only ever supposed to work for somebody else. I was supposed to be the creative person for somebody else. And that's what was keeping me from actually going full time into it. Whereas now I'm like, no, I can genuinely do this and make a living from it and live the life that I want and set it up in a way that I want versus, you know, what I think other people would like for me and for it to be. So yeah, it's hard to put it into words when you're just speaking like this, but it's like that's the journey. Like that is the hero's journey in a way where you're like setting off on this adventure, don't know what's gonna happen. Gonna be roadblocks, there's gonna be failures, but eventually you will come out the other side victorious and with everything that you set out to do and still just feeling like I'm literally just beginning because there's so much to do and still aware of the fact that it wasn't that long ago where I was like scraping the barrel. Um so I'm saying this, I'm not necessarily victorious overall. I've come through this period where um it was difficult and hard and uncertain and everything else, but now coming to a point where I've worked hard enough to be like, okay, I can see this, I can see the path to get really put that in the past and put those limiting beliefs in the past to kind of become a person that builds this properly, which is a nice place to be.
But also your mission has changed because we are starting a family.
Exactly.
You're gonna be a dad
I'm gonna be a dad
very soon.
very soon. Yeah, which is why I have this kind of, yeah, deeper purpose, deeper mission, deeper desire to actually build it. It's not necessarily about me anymore, whereas it was before. Um, when you when you kind of receive news like that, it sparks something like instinctual, primal, and that's why I was kind of saying I feel like our roles have switched, where
Struggling with, by the way.
I know because you're stubborn. Um, whereas
I like being in control
I
and being the
know,
one that providing everything.
yeah, no. Whereas typically coming into more of a masculine energy now, where I had
Mm.
been more in the feminine, inward, thinking a lot, emotional, and that's valuable. Um, but this period is valuable for both of us to go into that opposite role because you had been in masculine outward action for so long, and that was good for you at that time to be able to support me in that more inward feminine sort of period. Um, and we were talking about this the other day, whereas like if we don't let each other, um, what was the word? If we don't let each other move into these new roles and identities and energies, that's we're gonna stay stuck in the past. So although it's hard for me to accept the responsibility of providing for a family because you might not be working. It's also hard for you to take a step back and, just like relax for a little bit and like not go so hard on the outward journey. It's more of an inward journey now where you're going to become a mom and everything else. But if I was to kind of lean on you for providing, we wouldn't, I wouldn't develop the kind of person I need to be for our future, and you wouldn't be developing that feminine side that's coming out naturally over the next while of being a mom and caring for a child and all that sort of stuff. So that journey and that switch has been interesting as well because it's in transition, but it's definitely feeling a lot more solid, and we're understanding it a lot more, I feel.
You are. I'm battling with
Yeah, no,
it.
but you might not be accepting it, but I feel like you're under I feel like you're understanding what needs to
Yes,
happen.
logically I
Yeah,
understand it, but I haven't like
yeah.
I'm really struggling with it.
So yeah, I think the thing is in order for us to become the next version of ourselves, we both need to accept and surrender to these these new instinctual feelings that are actually coming, even if we are scared and want to fight them off and everything else, because it might come full circle again, where I'm gonna, work hard enough now over the next couple of years to build the business to a point where I can take a step back and maybe 2 years' time, the um our family and kids will actually need me more for the nurturing aspect and developing their personalities. And this podcast might take off and you might, be more active in terms of that, going to different places, visiting different people, interviewing different, you know.
That's the dream.
So we look back on this and see. But the main point is that we need to accept these natural growth periods energetically and physically and everything else.
Beautiful. My last question is that I end all conversations. What piece of advice would you give to yourself 2 years ago when you were in the shit?
2 years ago seems very close to now. Probably have a better answer first, further back than
Okay,
2 years ago,
go for it.
because I knew you were going to ask this, so I was thinking about it.
It's like my signature style.
So this is kind of like controversial, but most people would say just be yourself. I would say don't be yourself. Don't be yourself around people who don't accept you for who you are. Instead, take yourself off, remove those people from your life, and figure out who you are. When you figure out who you are, the people that are meant to be in your life will come to you.
Well
That's it.
done. Well done.